Hello and welcome to the one, the only Gaming Booth Show, episode 12. Now with 20 games included, with the majority being a secret. As always, I'm your host Mitch, and joining me is one whose existence can be considered sad, Russell.
Sad Joker face, I guess?
You guess. Because we live in a sad existence here at Optional Extra. And joining him is Jordan, who has literally no idea how to eat a Big Mac.
Well, I don't want to eat those computers. They wouldn't taste very well.
With this podcast, we always start by visiting a place that's of an alternate reality. It's made up of multiple of these because it's called the multiverse. And this week we're visiting Earth 799M, a world where video games have all been banned. They were considered to be a waste of time, blamed for lowering productivity, and destroying the lives of children through their addictive and clearly pure evil nature. So it's pretty much a world I would call dead on arrival, but in the multiverse we don't leave worlds like that. We leave them like that, but when we arrive they're pretty good. So our goal in this multiverse, I mean, we're getting caught up in a couple legal matters last week as well, but this week we're standing in front of the Supreme Court of this world. Apparently they just need one. And I need each of you to present a game that will be universally considered a benefit to this world, and it'll clearly make the world understand and see our point of view that games are very useful, and, you know, this world already sounds pretty boring, so I want to kind of liven it up a bit, you know?
Well, admittedly, it's a world that video games is the only aspect that's missing, right? So it's still got movies and TV shows and that kind of thing, right? Literature.
Yeah, it's still got everything. It's just like video games are clearly the problem.
Okay, well, in that case, I will bring a game that will likely be something they conceptually understand, but can learn to understand the genre, and that, in the spirit of something that happened this week, I would bring Telltale's Walking Dead episode 1, or season 1, rather.
Now, do you think that's a bit cruel?
Look, the reason to bring this game is not only because of its emotional impact and standard for the industry, where it told incredibly compelling story while being a game medium. It didn't sacrifice that portion. It allowed you to create the narrative as you played. And I feel like in a world that doesn't have games, this would be a very conceptually easy game for them to understand and grasp, while at the same point understanding what games can bring to this world. So there's a benefit in the fact that tells you. The fact that it can tell stories and actually add some benefit in terms of the medium itself, and not just being like people play them to shoot people. More, this can tell stories that movies couldn't tell. Exactly.
That's why the angle.
The only problem is if there was a person like me in that world trying to play this game, they wouldn't know how to play it properly, because I couldn't get past the first bit.
What? Okay.
That's a tangent for another time. Yeah. We're in the Supreme Court. They're busy. You know, Jordan, What are you going to bring?
I'm actually going to bring a well-known game, especially by Xbox standards, called Minecraft.
Ugh.
You may groan when I say that name, however, but you got to remember, in this multiverse, they haven't ever heard of Minecraft. So for them, this would be like the first time they've ever played this game.
Jordan, is this a good thing or a bad thing to add this?
It's a good thing for multiple reasons. But firstly, do you remember the first time you played Minecraft and how you really enjoyed it, and then you
I remember being very confused by it and not really understanding it, but yes.
Doesn't describe my experience at all with the game.
Well, anyway, think of it this way. It's a world that you can be completely creative in a world that needs a bit more creativity.
Well, they need video games.
They need those games.
Yes, they need video games. So why not give them a sandbox game that they can go crazy with for hours and hours and create heaps of stuff? Maybe even bring that into the real world somehow instead of just the video game itself.
Jordan, I have to ask, before you continue, the fact that a major part of the banning of video games was because of their addictive nature. And this game is built for children, which... I don't know.
Yes, but that's what I was about to get to. The other part of it is, it's not that it's so addictive that you can tell them to stop. Say, you know, you're a parent and your kids are like bugging the crap out of you and you can't pay for someone to look after them and whatnot. Just put this game on and you have hours of peace.
That's true, but it kind of... I don't know. I'll see what the Supreme Court says, but, you know, just going off that, it's just... doesn't seem like it's going to get through. But, yeah, so interesting arguments. The Supreme Court has had a long and bitter debate shouting things about demons and all kinds of things, but they have started to see that games are more than just pure evil, and the fact that The Walking Dead almost got through, but the fact of the zombies and all kinds of blood everywhere, they were just like, video games are for children, how can we let this through? So, just the way of the world. And Jordan, Minecraft was, just like The Walking Dead, almost got through, but the fact is they just don't like it. They think it's a terrible video game, and they just don't want that there.
It's like Lego in digital form.
Yeah, but they got Lego. Why would they need this? And they've just said no. So not much I can do, apart from destroy this multiverse, which I have the capacity to do. I don't know if I should do it, but we'll save that to another time. But yeah, so Supreme Court, legal matters, there are troublesome
it always takes a lot of time for stuff to get through court, so...
It does, except in the multiverse where they somehow do it instantly. But we'll be back in a moment to discuss everything in the news. Okay, welcome back. So we're going straight into the news, and the news this past week has been, it's been a journey. So I want to start off with probably the worst news of the week and channel some Yong Yeah, because Telltale Games has made the decision to begin a majority studio closure. And on Twitter, the CEO, Pete Hawley, said it's technically not closed, but a lot of people have been dismissed, which means there's 25 people staying on to fulfill its obligations, whatever that means. And yeah, so the basic reason is they haven't been making money. It's a good way to bankrupt a business, which, most of them should be making money, if not all of them. So I
think their biggest problem was they didn't add microtransactions in.
They certainly split it up and tried to make you pay for different things, but there were Telltale signs, if you catch what I mean, where they were there because they recently restructured last year with their CEO for a long time, Kevin Bruner. I think that's how you pronounce it. Looks like the way I pronounce it. He was removed by the board, replaced with Pete Hawley, mentioned before, who is the former VP for games at Zynga, who worked alongside the one, the only, Destroyer of Worlds, Don Matrick. And they also cut 90 jobs. More recently, though, they dropped their engine to use Unity. So first off, what are our initial thoughts on this whole matter? Because, it's pretty dramatic. I don't know if it's out of nowhere, as there were signs, and I want to hear what we thought about the games and the fact that it's at an end. It's over. Telltale Games.
There's a lot of disturbing facts about this closure that make it a very unfortunate situation, even though it seems like the writing was on the wall for a very long time now, at least a year.
Yeah, we'll get into everything about
that. But just on an initial level of just before you look into all the firing and all the rest of the aspect, just the Telltale's now gone. It is sad because there were a lot of games that they made that I really did enjoy. Like The Walking Dead Season 1 in particular was such an emotional roller coaster. It's one of the games that hit me on such a deep level when I played it that most games struggle to do. And the fact that it wasn't such a big game focus in terms of mechanics, but just the story they told was such an excellent depiction of that kind of zombie post-apocalyptic future. It's just it had me immediately interested in anything they developed, and so many games since then. Wolf Among Us, Batman Season 1, these games I also all really enjoyed. But the undeniable fact is that there was an overall amount of repetition and familiarity to each game they released.
Yeah, there was definitely that problem. Jordan, what's your familiarity with Telltale Games?
Well, to me, I've only really tried one or two of them, which is the original Walking Dead, that I couldn't get past the first.
I don't know how.
I just couldn't work out what I was meant to do. I tried a whole bunch of stuff. Maybe I didn't try long enough. But to me, not even playing them, they look the same. Yeah. So they all felt like that game that I didn't know how to work out. So I was like, okay, I'll just skip all these games.
Yeah, they do very much look alike, and that is a big problem. It's the thing is, they're not getting their promised The Wolf Among Us Season 2, which people are losing their minds out of, and to talk about another season of a show game. They kind of put it in that way, which is, interesting of them. So, The Walking Dead final season is pretty much at risk of not seeing its end because it's been technically cancelled after episode 2 has come out, which is really shitty for people who waited this long to see it conclude. And episode 2 of it is out now, so...
Well, it's one of those things where if you've paid for content, like 5 episodes or whatever it is, aren't you essentially not getting what you paid for?
Yeah.
Literally, it's just... You wonder if they're going to do refunds and stuff, a bit like how WildStar closing down, they are offering refunds, but I guess the problem is they're under NC Soft. This is Telltale. They seem to have no money because, they've basically tried to avoid bankruptcy by basically saying they're bankrupt.
I declare bankruptcy!
Pretty damn close to.
They said it, but they didn't really say it. But the fact they're also looking into finishing it in some capacity, whatever that means. Is it a comic book or whatever? Does this really help fans get over the fact that they have waited this long for an end and now not to really get one?
Problem is that they'll finish it, but it won't be as good as what it should be, and it might ruin the entire experience.
Well,
yeah.
Instead of just stopping.
Well, as a massive fan of that first game, since then I've played the second game, the Michonne spin-off one, and by that point I was kind of losing interest in the series to begin with. Season 3, I own it, but I haven't got around to playing it. And Season 4, the final season, the penultimate season, the conclusion to this series, it just, for whatever reason, I haven't cared. I knew at some point I was going to pick it up and play it before this news dropped, but it just never stood out to me as something I needed to play. It just felt like, it didn't feel like it was going to be that massive conclusion to the story. Yes, that was the intention, but that
was the promise.
as a fan of at least the original couple, I just felt like there was nothing that stood out to me like I had to play this right now. I could pick it up later when they finish it. I mean, that was just...
Well, they've definitely reached the end now.
Yeah,
so
and it was just a problem with the season aspect they had. It became incredibly difficult for some of them. I remember Wolf Among Us was one where... That was an excellent season. I really enjoyed it, but the gap between the episodes was massive. It would just be several months before you could get to the next 1 hour, 2 hour, story part of it. And I think that hurt Telltale big time. The fact that it tried to keep it in the mindset of everyone because it released, every couple of months or whatever. But for people invested in the story, it's hard to stay invested over months for another 2 hour, episode thing. It's difficult.
That was the one big thing for me was if you went to buy the game at launch, you get one chapter and then you're waiting.
Yeah.
So it was why not wait till the whole thing's out and then buy it? Or why don't they release the whole thing and then, get more money from it?
It eventually started, it probably did become a problem because it's just they allowed them to spread out the development so they could, do things at a slower pace. But I think it was part of the sign of that, they were just redoing what The Walking Dead presented, making decisions that prevented developers from, they really just wanted to keep doing what The Walking Dead had done. Which, the moment you keep doing it again and again and again and again, the whole wait and stuff, and if it's getting worse, people are going to get very sick of it very quickly. I think that is an important part that probably led to what you're feeling, Russell, that it never really did anything new that the first one didn't do.
And certainly the seasonal aspect of it, I feel like it basically hitched them to a train that forced them to be unable to adapt or change what they were doing. It's basically the game might take them an entire year to make, but because they've already hitched their wagon onto something that's problematic with bugs and graphical glitches and all these problems that Telltale Games infamously have, it basically meant they couldn't change it and they couldn't innovate on the story or gameplay halfway through because they already were committing to it so early on, and that I think became a problem of lack of innovation, that people just what's the point? I can just pick it up later for half off sale anyway.
There's two type of repetitions. There's good repetition and bad repetition. Good repetition is when you're innovating while still being repetitive, and then there's Telltale.
Yeah, Telltale didn't change anything, which is why their sales to the games, only a few of them were profit.
The licenses they got, I can imagine how expensive it would have been for them to obtain the Batman license, and that was one where
or Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it seemed to be a sale mistake. Batman did not do as well as they expected. I think Game of Thrones is probably the same thing.
Yeah, probably not as well as they hoped they would do because, apparently their biggest commercial failure is probably Batman, which, for a Batman game to be the failure, I think the writing should be square in front of everyone to say, like, if Batman didn't do well, there's something wrong with this studio.
There's something...
Say that to DC.
There's certainly something wrong with the marketing. I'd put it that way, where it's like they weren't getting beyond their reach, and they weren't showing people why they should keep buying Telltale games. I think for most people, it was like, you went in to begin with, like Jordan, or... You were just waiting, like I was. I just wait for the season to finish and pick it up, and by that point, it was probably on a sale, or it was too late for them to really matter.
I think what hurts more is for the people who worked at Telltale.
Oh, yeah.
Because they've now lost a job, they're receiving no severance for it.
Which is so bad.
Which is terrible, and they're taking them to court about it, so it's just, this doesn't get any worse for people making games. It's just like, it's sadly that you think that... I've heard this story before, like with many games, like... Definitely Kingdoms of Amalur is the first game that springs to mind that had troubles like these, but the even more interesting story is that Telltale was still hiring recently. So basically, like, who actually knew about the closure? Like, how much did the higher-ups hide it from their employees? Because it sounds like no one really knew.
Wouldn't you hate to be that guy that literally just got their job in the game?
There is literally
got a job in the game
a human being
a week later
in that situation right now. Who'd finally got that job, and now they're just like, well, shit, I'm fired already. That was a quick job.
Your resume, Telltale, 1 week, or something. Yeah, but I mean, if the writing was on the wall, the very fact that they were not able to pay anyone severance means they were very neglectful of their employees, to the point of they were taking on employmentship, as you said. They weren't prepared for this massive closure. They knew they had to do it because they could not afford to pay all these people, but they weren't managing it well at all. They basically did last-minute ditch effort, where it seems like they were like, we were hoping for massive funding from some external body. That didn't happen, so unfortunately we have to cut 90% of our staff. That's what happened.
Yeah, and go down to a skeleton crew. And what those skeleton crew are working on is apparently Minecraft Story Mode for Netflix, which is really an interesting step for Netflix, and the fact that they were already revealed to be working on a Stranger Things game, which now aren't happening, which Netflix intends to finish it, whatever that means. But it's like, that'll be the last real game, which I'm already curious about how it's going to work for them, which is Netflix, which they're obligated to do.
If it's less people, does it just mean that it's going to take a lot longer between episodes?
No, the game already exists.
Yeah, exactly. They're porting the pre-existing Minecraft story across. But this has been done before. I know I've watched movies where it's basically like that choice story, where it's like you make a choice and then the story goes off in that way in a video format. That has been done before, but it's very interesting to see Netflix's kind of picking these out, where it's like, oh, we'll do the Minecraft story, we've got the Stranger Things, and they will still be suing that Stranger Things, which is interesting on a Netflix front. Just like, oh, they seem like they want to pursue interactive story games, which is an interesting, pioneer landscape.
It'll be a fascinating thing to discuss in the future, but
yeah, but clearly contractually obligated to make that game, it seems like is the case for Telltale. Otherwise, I imagine they would absolutely want to finish that Walking Dead, and the fact they seem like they can't, or are absolutely struggling to justify making that final 2 episodes, means that there's some contract going on with Netflix that makes this Minecraft thing top priority for them, and they really have to do it.
Yeah, and it basically means Netflix is supporting what's left of Telltale, which is really nothing, and we don't expect there to be any future Telltale games unless someone buys the IP, and we know there's a company out there that loves to buy old, abandoned IP, and this is a new one, and, THQ Nordic probably already watching with a keen eye.
Yeah, and
they got the popcorn ready to snap it up and go.
Yeah, petting its white cat.
Yeah, and it's like, on a positive front for all this negative news, is like, at the very least, most of these people will probably get jobs elsewhere, and they are very much an expert in the storytelling genre, so a lot of these people, I'm sure, will have beneficial positions elsewhere anyway, especially with all the GoFundMe and all these kind of a job fair type things they're organising for the Telltale stuff. Starting
indie games, studios and stuff, because the genre of these games is not dead. In fact, they're almost stronger than ever, even if Telltale's gone, because they never innovated, but while they weren't innovating, Life is Strange came about. You got Man of Medan coming around too, and there's always this is bad for the people who work there, bad if you're fans of the games, but the type of games these are in a very strong state. So if you're a fan of those games, I think the worry there is kind of gone, but it's always an issue when companies close down out of nowhere, and what that means, what the whole leaves. You wonder what happens next.
Yeah, I mean,
You can almost say The Wolf Among Us 2 is like a firefight scenario
yeah,
where
except,
you want more, but you're never going to get it.
yeah,
Sort of.
It is kind of like that. Where it's like Wolf Among Us Season 2 is like, I really do think it's like an impossible thing. I think Walking Dead is the only one where like I can imagine they've already written probably the entire story for the remaining 2 episodes. They just have to record the voice actors, actually make it. So I think that's the only thing you'll get out of it if they can somehow survive that. You're not getting Wolf Among Us Season 2. That's not happening.
Yeah, you're not getting a Serenity situation. There is no movie coming out of this. And yeah, that's basically it for Telltale. And they had a good run. Starting from LucasArts people who, they created the storytelling thing. And sad it's gone, but life moves on. And so do we, because who knows where they're going with it. Or who knows where Kojima is taking it, because we've seen the TGS trailer for Death Stranding, which reveals that Troy Baker is joining the likes of Norman Reedus and Mads Mikkelsen, which showed his character being... I don't think he put on a voice. It sounded very Troy Baker.
Very Troy Baker, yeah.
Showing like a golden lion, black, weaving. Everything in this game looks weird.
A Pokemon.
Basically like the one from the cover of Pokemon Sun, except black and pretty gross. About this trailer, what do we think of it? Mainly, what does Russell think of it? Because I'm sure he's more to say than Jordan.
Well, I'll just quickly go in before
I didn't say you could do it.
To me, it was like it was a minute compared to the other one, so it was extremely short, and it was essentially like, oh, boss battle or something.
But
compared to the other ones, where it's more narrative.
That's the thing, though. Like in that minute, as short as it was, I felt like it had one of the most surprising things I'd seen so far from this game. At least everything they've been building up towards. It always felt like this game was trying to be a different game. Like, it wasn't trying to mimic what other people had done, and certainly what Kojima had done in the past with the Metal Gear series. But this, more than anything, felt like a game scene. Like it like a very gamified scene, where it's like he's summoning a boss battle. Like, the very fact that you saw that lion and thought it was a boss goes, that to me is the most gamified thing I've seen in this game so far. Like, it's like, oh, that is a boss. That's what it looks like to me.
Honestly, felt more like a Dark Souls boss than anything else.
Yeah. In terms of like the game, we've seen that definitely looks like the game, and obviously the whole courier thing of being a postman is definitely gameplay.
Yeah, absolutely. Like
So definitely seen some gameplay now.
Yeah, the E3 footage absolutely was gameplay when he was like sneaking past the weird spirit things and walking up the cliffs and all the rest of it. Like, you're certainly
walking simulator.
That's on face value. Like, I'm sure it's going to be very narrative focused. It's going to be very cryptic, and like Kojima, as crazy as ideas get, it's always coming from something. It's not like he just goes, I'm just going to make it up and just make these crazy out there Atlantis things. Like, there's a core and a crux to his thought process. It's just filtered through the mind of Kojima and then output on the other end. And
yeah, and
it's
he knows what he's outputting.
Yeah, and it's like, as crazy as this trailer was, it's still just like something about it's just so intriguing and interesting. Where it's like the way, just how the Troy Baker's character, I think Goldmask, I can't remember what the official name was, but like the way he kind of like moves and presents himself, and then he takes off his gold mask. He's still got a mask underneath that mask, and then he calls forth
it's a
these
maskception.
Dark spirits from the ground rising up from the other plane, and yeah, and then summoning this dog lion thing that has a gold face as well. The gold fact alone is very interesting. How much has been intricately tied to all the footage we've been seeing,
we've seen gold in previous trailers. Is like one of the first ones shows the gold on some body. It's just like everything we see is always like there's always something going on. He's thought about these trailers more than we could ever know, because all of these are tied in ways that you could spend literally hundreds of hours trying to get through this to try and figure out what is actually 100% going on here, because we don't actually know. Because from what we've seen there's invisible enemies. Like, they look scary as shit. Like, I am basically terrified of this game. We've seen a lot of babies, a lot of naked dudes, talking about ropes, seeing giant things. This is like, what is going on here? But it's all so fascinating.
Yeah, and it's like,
part of it with the creatures reminds me of the movie The Quiet Place. Where you have to be really quiet. You can't, they can't see you unless you speak, And
real quick, I wonder how much of that might influence a bit of him, because he's definitely a fan of media. He definitely consumes a lot of it.
Very much so. Like to the point of like he gets very obsessive, like especially since Metal Solid 5, of like getting movie actors or people he respects. The female character from the last trailer was like the Bionic Woman, and I can't remember what he was saying, but it was something basically along the lines of she was the only person I wanted for this role, and I was so glad I got her for it. And it's just how much he idolizes directors and.
Clearly Guillermo del Toro, who he's tried to work with in the past to Silent Hills, but we saw Konami take that away. Probably for the best, because we would never have gotten this.
It's just interesting to see like how...
And the crazy amount of realism to each person as well. It's like, you can tell it's them and not just someone else.
Bringing their likeness into the game. Like, Troy Baker, I don't think is the like, visually under the mask, but we don't know, because everyone else has been. Norman Reedus, Mads Mikkelsen, like, they are those people in real life that just... adapted into the game. In terms of Troy, it's with all the get up, it's hard to tell if that's supposed to be him or not. Voice, yes. Obviously.
He's used his likeness before though, in Call of Duty Advanced Warfare of all things. So he's not against using that. It's just like, do we think he's behind that mask? Will we even find out? Probably not. It's probably even a mask under that mask, just to screw with us.
I'm pretty sure even if we didn't find out, people would just put his face there and assume it.
It's interesting because when I see the mask, and also when he was talking about at Tokyo Game Show, like they were showing concept art or character art for some of the other characters they have not shown yet in game, and it's just interesting to see how similar and close these skeleton masks are to the Luden symbol, which is their mascot for their studio, not the game, their studio. And it's just funny to see this mascot, which was it's like is it Death Stranding or is it your logo for Kojima Productions? It's like it feels like it's hard to tell at times what actually is the situation here, or maybe it's just inspiration applied through multiple characters.
It's one of those games we know very little about, but we still want to buy it.
And we want to know as much as we can.
I mean, if this is really Kojima Unleashed, like. This is the game where he's been held back. No, held back's not probably a bad word, but basically he's been restricted to the Metal Gear series pretty much forever. Yes, he had contributions to other games like PT and A Zone of Enders, but for the most part, it's been Metal Gear for him. And this is really like the chance to do something brand new, while at the same time being unshackled from what he experienced in the past. And like, I'll keep coming. Like, that was very much a nod and an attack against what Konami did to him, and like how much he dealt with in those last kind of year before he left.
Controversy.
Yeah,
it's just like I'm very fascinated to see what Kojima Untethered is with like a company that supports whatever madness he thinks up. There's no one going over him going like, I don't know.
I don't know about that.
So just like, you do it. You do you. You make that game. We'll you'll publish it. I'm sure it'll be fantastic.
Yeah, and we'll just let him go to any length he wants to do. I mean, Kojima is also such a trolly person in the sense of he knows what the internet's like. He's very active in that way, and I guarantee in that 1 minute trailer there is so much to dig into if you really like dig into it and directly compare it to what he's revealed in the past. Go into like scriptures of like ancient mythologies, like the Egyptian thing Troy Baker's wearing. Like there's all stuff going on there.
There's so much thought in it. It's so in depth. It's like, it's fascinating as an outsider to just watch and see, like, every time it comes out, like, people right in there analysing every single aspect. And it's just, I'm just sitting there going, yeah, there's black stuff and it looks pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean,
I can't wait to actually play it.
Yeah, it looks good is the key thing. Like, for people who are not so invested in Kojima, it's like, on just face value, it's intriguing. Very intriguing to look at what's happening.
That Decima engine.
Yeah, very good engine.
It's almost like the people that wouldn't want to play it would still watch like a movie version of it. It's that intriguing.
Yeah, I'm sure people are going to do that. I think you'd be losing like what this is. It's like very open to your interpretation, and I think part of playing it would alter that. And I think it's an important part of the game.
Yeah,
personally,
it's one of those things where it's like, if Kojima wanted to go make movies, I'm guaranteed he could go make movies. He clearly picks video games because he feels like he can always contribute something to that genre, but still very much impacted by movies. Like, there's no question every game he's made has been heavily inspired by movies and TV shows and literature and whatnot.
It's like all the inspiration's there, and yeah, it's very exciting to see what we get next. When is this game coming out? Apparently it's in development faster than any game they've ever seen, but
yeah.
I don't know, like, this could be years away, it could be sooner than we think. I'm hoping he gets as much time to work on this as possible, and Metal Gear Solid 5 doesn't have a repeat. And by the look of it, I think Kojima is sitting in his own little world. Sony's just sitting there on the outside going, yep, cool.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, keep doing that. And yeah, so it's very exciting. Any last words about this trailer?
Another way you could I sort of look at it, if I didn't really know what the hell was going on, you could almost think like it's a darker version of a Pokemon game. You walk around a lot, there's a lot of legendary things up in the sky, and big Pokemon.
It's just... I'm just looking forward to the ambitious whatever this is. Like, it's not tied to anything in the past. I just want a brand new experience. I'm hoping it's not going to be like I can just see remnants of like, oh, here's Psycho Mantis, here's these characters he's done before. I'm hoping it's all brand new, and I definitely feel that is the case at the moment.
Yeah, definitely.
I wonder if they're going to have any like Psycho Mantis things where it's like you have to switch your controller into another port or something.
Hope not. But he's probably thinking of stuff like that. He always has been.
Yeah.
But yeah, Death Stranding, like a couple of years away. Trailers are always fascinating. Can't wait for the next one. So we'll be back in a moment to discuss everything about the PlayStation Classic. Welcome back to the Gaming Booth Show. Recently, we got a surprise announcement that Sony is ripping off Nintendo and releasing its own mini console, which is pretty exciting because it's the PlayStation Classic. It comes out on December 3rd, the year after. Oh, a year after.
Year after.
A day after my birthday. And it could have been just earlier. One day earlier would have been cool, but to talk about the PlayStation Classic, it includes 2 controllers and it's $150 down under.
It's not the DualShock controller though, so this is the non-analog, non-rumble specific version.
It's the cheap
replicas
one.
of the original PlayStation 1.
It's a cheap one they could fit and include 2 for this price. So we know what 5 out of the 20 games are, which the 5 are Final Fantasy VII, obvious one. Jumping Flash. What's Jumping Flash? Do you know what that is, Russell?
I mean, the only reason I even know this game is because when the PS3 was releasing the PS1 classics, it was one of the games they released. But other than that fact, I wouldn't be putting it in the top 20 PS1, classics, what's represent the core lineup. That would not be on my list.
Yeah. Clearly, someone at Sony is a big fan of Jumping Flash, and someone else is a big fan of this one, as we know, because it's Ridge Racer. Ridge Racer. Type 4. Interesting choice. We'll talk about why it's a bit weird later, but I think you already know because Gran Turismo, come on. We've got Tekken 3, and we've got Wild Arms. So they're the 5 we know.
There's 2 absolute picks on there, like Tekken 3 had to be on this set, as did Final Fantasy 7. The other 3, Wild Arms is also a pretty good pick, but I don't think a necessary pick. But the other 2 are kind of weird, especially when there's so many other classic PS1 games.
Yeah, there are so many other good games on this console. It's kind of weird to be buying this thing, which I think I've bought it. Don't know about any of you, but
until they actually show what I'm getting, I wouldn't be putting a cent on it because for all we know, we might get really bad games or we might get really good games.
Yeah, or you might get a Spider-Man Collector's Edition where you get a statue where he's on a pile of junk. Wouldn't that be unfortunate?
Spoilers.
It would be unfortunate, but it's just interesting to see features that maybe were possible and they just confirmed that wasn't the case. Like, there is no trophy support, there is no online support, there's no way of adding more games to this set, so it is a in-base 20 games. That is what you're getting. There is nothing else beyond that point. And
so obviously we need to have a big discussion about what are the best 20 PlayStation 1 games that definitely deserve their spot, because here at Optional Extra, we're a big fan of a certain Castlevania, Symphony of the Night, which just got a PS4 port with Rondo of Blood, but in terms of definitive PS1 games, you have to have Castlevania Symphony of the Night. There's no way against it.
Well, yeah, it's just... it has to be on there. Will Konami allow it? I certainly hope so, especially considering the Rondo of Blood collaboration trophy.
It's a good sign. It's a good sign, so...
Yeah.
I guess one of the biggest things before we get to any other games is if it's available on like the PlayStation 4 or the PlayStation 3, what's the point of having it on something separate? Castlevania is a good one because it isn't on that, but other ones...
Well, it's
about to be, and you can get it on Xbox One backwards compatibility, so that is available in other places. But I think if you're making the console that's meant to show you what the best games of the PS1 were. Regardless of remakes or re-releases or whatever, you need these definitive games like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, clearly a definitive PS1 game.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think it needs to be on there. I do agree with Jordan that there's a problem. There's going to be a problem with a lot of games that should be in this collection where it's like they have done better versions of them. Crash, Spyro, like that has that problem. But at the same time, it
Resident
should be
Evil
is
another one.
Yeah.
They've just they've remastered already, and they're remaking a second one. So why would they put the original on this console?
But I think the argument there is also like, how definitive is Resident Evil for the PS1? That is the argument I expect to be making a lot.
Yeah, and I think Castlevania's up there, and the fact that I think a lot of people would put that probably on the best games ever made, I think it should be on this list.
There's some games that I played on the PlayStation 1 that I would really want to be on this, but I know deep down they're not going to be on it, like, 101 Dalmatians or other Disney games, because they're just super fun to play when you're a kid.
Make the argument of why you think it should be on there, but...
I mean, 101 Dalmatians, it's like you get to play as some Dalmatians going around collecting bones, digging,
You've really
climbing
sold
stuff, going through Piccadilly,
But, Jordan, let me ask you a question. If you think they're defining games on PlayStation, does 101 Dalmatians come up in that list?
Well, for me as a kid, it was one of the ones I played, so yes.
Okay.
So Jordan as a kid is wrong.
You go the nostalgia aspect, sure. 101 Dalmatians for you, Jordan, as would, I guess, in like Hercules and those kind of games.
Yeah, instead of just having a PlayStation Classic console, why not just have a Disney console? Done.
Yeah, I mean, that's another option. But it's one of those things where it's like when Sony's releasing all their old PS1 classics and whatnot for the PS3, I'm pretty confident 101 Dalmatians on there. Could be wrong, but I don't think it
I'm
was.
hoping it's on there, but it's not going to be on there. I know deep down.
Yeah, so I would recommend picking another one to put in the 15 we need to complete this.
Well, if they're wanting someone that's a mascot that's iconic to PlayStation, wouldn't you go Papa the Rapper?
Parappa the Rapper?
Parappa the Rapper? I mean, you would. Yeah, he is definitely like one of those classic games.
Pretty niche.
But the case I would make is the same problem you have with quite a few of these is that they remade it in HD, and it wasn't well received. So... Would you put it on the collection? I don't know. And it's also very short. It's a very short game.
Yeah, so it's like, is that the nail in the coffin? Because, I mean, it is a PS1 classic, and, like, am I thinking, like, is it definitive? I hadn't heard of Parappa the Rapper until I started watching Easy Allies stuff, because, shout out to Carl Bossman. I'm
a big fan of Parappa the Rapper. The game I played heaps as a kid. I know all the songs inside and out, every single one, because I played it so often.
He sung one on a video too. If you want to check out that, it's about the Tatakus.
That's true.
He does a little rap.
That's true. I definitely wanted to be on the list, but even looking at the list we've kind of got in front of us right now, I'm going, I don't know if it cuts with the 15 we have, if it would be in that list simply because they remade it, and it looks better. It sounds better.
Let's cut to the point. Metal Gear Solid should be on there.
Metal Gear Solid. If you got Castlevania, Metal Gear's got to be on there. Simple as that.
So you can get Metal Gear Solid 2, I think at 3 and 4 in a collection, but it didn't have the original one, so.
Well, different console. It
true.
didn't have it. I think that's a lie.
There
I think it did have
one
it in
of
certain
them.
countries.
The main one didn't have it. One of the others did. I mean, for the most part, you can't get it on a modern system. No. You can't get it on the PS3.
It's one of those. This is one of those consoles. I want games that you can't really get anywhere else.
And they haven't remade it. And Metal Gear's an absolutely amazing, genre-defining game that impacted so many in this industry. It's probably one of the best PS1 games. I would say, True Twin Snakes, I forgot about that one, but I don't really count it because they wasn't Kojima directed and all that kind of aspect. So, Metal Gear has to be on this list. Like, to me, it would be the top pick. Absolutely. Metal Gear needs to be on there.
Yeah, so we've got 2, 13. Got a good list here of some really good classics.
I think one that should definitely be on it as well that you'd probably both agree is Crash Team Racing. They've had Crash Bandicoot rebooted 1, 2, and 3, but they didn't bring back in the racing.
No, because they knew it was inferior to Mario Kart.
Oh,
I don't know. I really do like Crash Team Racing. It was more in the line of like Diddy Kong Racing from the Nintendo 64. It's great. It's different, and more importantly than I think all of these, it's a mascot defining figure for Sony that isn't been made better with the remakes. So indeed. I think Crash Team Racing would be a really good pick.
And it's a good one for those 2 controllers because like Symphony of the Night and Metal Gear Solid, the only thing for Metal Gear Solid is swapping the ports.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Yeah, that's multiplayer. You're right. That's 2 controllers. Crash Team Racing absolutely should be on that list.
Yeah. So, in about Crash Team Racing, it's like that multiplayer game, and then you kind of think, what else is multiplayer that will take use of those 2 controllers? And then you think other racing games like Gran Turismo or Wipeout. And it's just like when you think of PS1, and definitive racing games. Like, if you don't include Gran Turismo, you've no idea what you're talking about.
The biggest problem is that they already have a racing game.
Yeah.
No one, like, multiple games of the same
It's Ridge
genre.
Racer, Jordan. Ridge Racer.
It's disappointing that it was Ridge Racer, because it's like, if it was like Twisted Metal or Wipeout or one of those, which is very distinctly different, but Gran Turismo and Ridge Racer are both kind of more serious driving simulator games.
Yeah,
but
one's better
at the
than
same
the
time,
other.
Gran Turismo is one of their best-selling franchises ever in Sony's history.
Full stop.
And it's super impactful for the console. I think Gran Turismo should be on the list, and even though Ridge Racer, it will overshadow Ridge Racer, is the
definitely.
aspect it'll have.
It's almost like they should have just picked Gran Turismo instead of Ridge
that's
Racer.
what I think. It's just like, if you see
Yeah, that
Gran
should be,
Turismo and Ridge Racer next to each other, you're going to pick Gran Turismo. You're not going to pick Ridge Racer.
But multiplayer, better game. More. I mean, Ridge Racer, I personally didn't play I think Ridge Racer 4 is the one they're including, but just on face value, like, Gran Turismo is the franchise that Sony has been like, it's been their best seller from most of their platforms. So Gran Turismo should be on this list.
Yeah, and it's like, thinking about Wipeout, it's like, that also had a remaster. It's like, a lot of these have had redoings, and it's just like, there is one on this list that we've done a pretty comprehensive video on that is getting a remake. When that is, we don't know, but does Medieval deserve a spot?
It is another one of their...
Sort of iconic? Sort of, like, he's a bit Parker the
iconic sort of
Rapper and,
things.
like, niche-ish.
There's a couple of games in that kind of more niche, but still iconic to the PlayStation platform, and Medieval is absolutely one of those games. But the problem with Medieval, it's not that big a problem, but it's the fact that they dropped the analog support, which means you don't have the ability to control the camera with an analog stick. But at the same time, I think it would be a good pick, because you also, when you're building a collection of games, you want them to feel different and look different. And Medieval not only fits that criteria, but it doesn't have any other competition really on the PS1 that is similar.
That's similar to that,
which is itself a very good thing. Yeah. Just the fact alone that they're doing some kind of remake, the exact context has not been elaborated on since PSX, but the very fact that it's in their mindset, I would not be surprised to find out Medieval is one of the ones.
It'd be a good way to bring it back into the spotlight.
Yeah, just real quick. And it's an IP they own, like, flat out. They don't need to ask anyone.
It's a lot easier to do that. Just pick one
rather than, like, Symphony or Metal Gear. It's just like, we have to ask Konami, where Medieval is just, like, internal.
Do you think the reason why they only showed 5 games is because some of the games, like Medieval, if they're going to put it on it, they're still trying to work out how to change the control scheme to work for it?
Well, the control scheme did work for it.
It did support it. It just, as not most games, but quite a lot of games did, they added extra functionality for the DualShock control. Metal Gear had, like, vibrations for Psycho Mantis section. Like, there were extra things that they could do. The only game I recall that absolutely cannot be in this collection, and even though it should be, in my opinion, is Ape Escape, because not only was it an excellent game, but it was the justification for the analog stick, and because of that justification, it does not work without it. So it will not work in this set, which is a shame in itself. The next one I think of is Resident Evil, and that Resident Evil had 3 games on the PS1, well, a little bit more if you count, like, Director's Cut and that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's one that hasn't got much love.
Yeah, and Resident Evil 3 is that list. And Resident Evil 3 Nemesis in itself is a really good game. They really, in a lot of ways, it was kind of like building on what Resident Evil 2 had done and be more technically impressive in how Nemesis could break through walls and that kind of thing, and something that chased you throughout the whole game. And even though I think Resident Evil 2 is probably the one I'd pick out of all the 3 initially, because they're remaking, it's going to be way better. Resident Evil 3 would be the one that we should pick.
See, I agree with that. The other biggest issue with it, though, is if you're having one like that, or like Harry Potter, sometimes it's almost best to just do a remaster of them instead of having...
Well, I think what kills Harry Potter for even having a chance is licensing. Like, flat out, like, who owns that game? Nobody really knows. So it's just, Resident Evil 3 has a clear and obvious owner.
I can't remember if it was EA. Harry Potter might have been EA. I don't know if they own it. I don't know who owns that license. Maybe Warner Brothers, probably. I mean, they have the movies.
J.K. Rowling?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I think Harry Potter isn't definitive enough a PlayStation game for me to think it should be on this list. More serious. Now, the biggest one for me is Spyro. Do we put a Spyro on there? Because there's only 3 for the PS1, and all of them are about to be re-released very soon.
See, I think that'd be a waste of, like, if you only got 20 games and you're going to release it, there's no point having it on this console.
The argument there is that, like, when you think PS1, I'm thinking Spyro, I'm thinking Crash Bandicoot. Yeah. It's just like, they are the things that jump to mind, and I think if you want this to be the classic PlayStation, you need to have a Spyro, and I think probably Spyro 1, I guess, is the real
If you were going to have a Spyro, it'd be number 1.
Yeah, I think just for simplicity, do the first one. I think if you didn't pick the first one, 3 would be a good case because there's so many new abilities and characters in that one.
Definitely,
but I think because this is almost like a significance placement, I think Spyro 1 is the better pick.
Speaking of games that they recently released or planning to release as well, do you think the original Spider-Man will be on this?
Sony do probably on the right.
It's certainly an interesting one. How many have we got right now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
We've got
7.
We're
only like halfway there. I don't know. It's one of those ones where, like a lot of these games, of course, like a way better later. Do I think when I see Spider-Man PS1, do I think like that is an iconic game to that platform? Kinda. I mean, I don't know. Spider-Man might be a good pick, honestly.
But is Spider-Man 2 maybe a better game though?
It is, but it's not on a PS1 game.
I mean, would they try to market more on Spider-Man, seeing that it's been out recently?
It's very true. Its relevance right now. I think Spider-Man's probably a pretty good pick, actually.
The other one similar to that as well, while we're on that topic of new games, is what about the original Tomb Raider?
Yeah, one of those have to be on there. It was such a massive cult hit. They sold incredibly well, at least the first. I think 2 and 3 sold the best. But which one to pick is hard. They got better as they went along, for the most part.
I did a bit of research on it recently, and Tomb Raider 1 was the one that was the most about tombs and that sort of thing. Number 2 and 3 were rushed. So out of the 3, I'd go number 1 because it's like the most.
I would be going between 1 and the 4th one because the 4th one was more a personal story and it was all Egyptian tombs.
However,
1's more iconic. No one forgets that T-Rex scene. So I think put Tomb Raider 1 in there.
The other thing with number 4 you got to remember as well is that at the time they were wanting to kill off the franchise, so they secretly put an ending in to kill Tomb Raider, Lara.
They did, yeah.
So that made a lot of people angry. So I don't think they would put that back in there.
Yeah, speaking of Crystal Dynamics, they made some good games back then. And what about Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver? Does that probably deserve a spot? I would say so. Like, in terms of iconic games, like, it's different. It's out there. It's like vampires. It did things so in advance that it took years for games to even do some of what Legacy of Kain did.
It's one of those games like Shadow of the Colossus that I've heard so much about, but took forever to play it. So if it was on the PlayStation 1, I'd be like, yeah, I might as well give that a try.
I would definitely play it if it was on there.
Considering Final Fantasy VII's are represented, I assume Square Enix owns the original Legacy of Kain rights, not just the current rights. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's an easy get for them, and one that I believe would be a very good pick for the collection to round out different things.
Definitely. And to speak about different things, I know we've got a proper JRPG on there being Final Fantasy VII. What about more one that's sort of been forgotten, but its legacy certainly lives on, which is Xenogears, which in terms of JRPGs, it was doing mechs and all kinds of stuff. And
it is one of those things where it's like that game really does stand out at the time. Admittedly, as much as I loved it, I didn't like it as much as Final Fantasy 8 or 9 or 7, but I seriously doubt they're going to add Final Fantasy 8 and 9
No,
onto
I
this
think
list.
you're not going to get another mainline Final Fantasy.
Yeah, so if they add any RPG, I mean, they already have with Wild Arms, but any
That's
more
true.
RPGs, Xenogears is a really good pick. I think it's got a lot more going for it in a different way to those games. So I think Xenogears would be a really nice pick and a often forgotten pick, which is kind of the next one I really suggest. So Xenogears, I would say I'm all for, and Oddworld is the other one that I'd be like super for, because I really do feel like that world, they defined something so unique, so different, and really made like a creative storytelling aspect in a 2D plane that for the most part had it not been done up to that point. Like 2D platforming games with a story and like a world and all unique, all brand new, different aspects to it. It was incredibly creative and really good in its own right. And I feel like that would be an excellent pick to have these different choices.
Certainly different, and I certainly think it's kind of like, it's weird to be talking about the PS1. There's a lot of games here that have been brought forward, but there's so much left in the past. But Oddworld has definitely kept its mark ongoing, and it would be good to show, like, for the classic, that where Oddworld comes from, where was it that it originated from, and to put on the PS1 classic would be a good thing to do that.
Just very quickly, was Earthworm Jim on the PlayStation 1?
No, it wasn't.
No, okay. Pretty much got almost 15, but there's two that we haven't really talked about yet that would be kind of cool to see on it. They're both they're a little bit similar, but not similar. You've got Croc, which is like a 3D platformer with the crocodile, or you've got the original Rayman, which is a 2D platformer.
You've also got Gex.
And Gex, that's the other one I'm thinking of. One of those at least has to be on there.
Not Croc would be my quick argument.
which one is the best? Rayman is the best on that list. However, there's 2 that are 3D platformers and 1 that is a 2D platformer. It's not surprising that at that time the 2D platformers were the best versions of them for the most part. Mario 64 was probably the only exception, not a PlayStation game. But yeah, I still go Rayman's the best out of those 3. I think Croc is probably more PlayStation. If I think PlayStation, Gex to me is for whatever reason a 64 game. At least I think like Nintendo when I think Gex, and Rayman I think PC. So like if I was thinking PlayStation, I would go with Croc, but I think Rayman is the best game on that list and the one that people. If you're trying to sell a product, Rayman is far more recognizable, I think, than Croc and Gex are.
Definitely. I think,
That's
like,
true.
I know, you know who Rayman is, that are like, you say the words, it's like, if you think of the Rabbids, that's the first thing you think of, and the second thing you think is they came from something actually good, which was Rayman.
And they're still making games for Rayman too, so...
Two left. Well,
Exclusive Club is coming to an end.
I think for a unique genre that none of these games represent, but also have very big IP tied to it, is Final Fantasy Tactics. And I think it not only is an excellent game in its own right, but it's a game that doesn't have any representation in all the picks we have, where it's a turn-based, RPG, XCOM, Valkyrie Chronicles, like any of those type games.
The big issue with that is, though, then you're going to have 2 Final Fantasy games on this.
It's not a problem because they're so drastically different. And Final Fantasy games don't tie together in any way other than possibly like creature representation, like Bahamut or Chocobos or whatever. Other than that, they're pretty much self-contained, separate stories.
And it's a very different game. I think Final Fantasy Tactics is a game a lot of people long to have again, and I think in terms of like definitive PS1 games, I think Final Fantasy Tactics definitely can fit that bill. It's just like, now we have one choice out of the remaining PS1 games.
One choice.
We could go all out there and just go with Digimon World. It was like a really, really hard game. Digimon hasn't really been around for a little while. Go all nostalgic on the 90s.
You could go Yu-Gi-Oh! With the same breath, but I'm thinking of like what licensing and what they already have in terms of like if they're getting Crash and the Spyro, and I assume most likely those 2 will happen. I think they should happen. Why not chuck Tony Hawk's Pro Skater in there too? I think Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 is an excellent game. I think 3 was better when they improved on it and they built on it down the line. But I think 2 in itself is still a really good game, one that I recall playing so often as a kid. And Activision being the ownership shouldn't be too difficult to chuck that in as well, especially considering how much of a disaster the most recent live for that game
Number 5 was.
Return. And the other big deal is multiplayer. You want to justify the 2 controllers, and Tony Hawk's going to bring that into the
And like,
phrase.
we've hardly justified it so far.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah, you've got the racing games at that point. You've got the like a skateboard game. You've got like the serious story games. It kind of it has a bit of everything, at that point.
Certainly does, and that makes a really good varied console with, a heap of different games.
So with our picks, Mitch, what's the full list reading off?
So the list is Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Crash Team Racing, Final Fantasy Tactics, Gran Turismo, Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, Medieval, Metal Gear Solid...
The original, right?
Yeah, the original. Oddworld, Rayman, Resident Evil 3, Spider-Man, Spyro 1, Tomb Raider 1, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, and Xenogears to round off the list.
Plus the other 5.
Plus the Final Fantasy 7, Ridge Racer, Tekken 3, and Wild Arms. That is what the definitive PlayStation should be, because they're the definitive games in our opinion.
Like that list is very strong. Like if you got those, not all of them are like the cream of the crop, the best for the platform, but it's a bit of diversity and certainly all good experiences in their own right.
It basically shows you what the PS1 is all about.
Which is what
diversity.
you want.
Yeah,
that's just going to be the matter of how many are we actually going to get right.
Yeah, find out when it gets announced.
I'm sure some of them are going to be spot on. We'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if we get some weird ones.
I still think they're going to put 101 Dalmatians on there.
I'm sure, Jordan. I'm sure.
You wait. They'll put it on there. Or they might even surprise you and put 102 Dalmatians on.
Oh my god. That would certainly shock me. It's just like, this is what I hope. Like, there's a lot of great games that I've just said, which, I would be very happy with my purchase if this is true. And I think everyone who wants a PS1 to be as, like, showing what that console was and what legacy it brought and how it lives on, because a lot of these games live on in remakes, re-releases, but some of them have been lost to time, and hopefully this brings them back where they deserve to be. So we'll be back in a moment to end the show. Alright, so that's a Gaming Booth show for another week. Quite a long episode. Got to talk about a lot of interesting, diverse things, and had a lot of fun here. Thank you both for joining me on this, as always.
Until next time.
All good.
If you enjoyed what we have, you can like and subscribe here on YouTube, or you can find us on SoundCloud and any podcasting services and follow us there. You can find us at optionalextra.net, now without a hyphen in the middle. We have a full proper domain. And yeah, if you like the rest of our content, you're already in the right place for all of it. We do a lot of different things. Do a bunch of medleys mixed together by Russell. We take a look at the newest games, and we do a lot. We do a lot of different things, but the one thing we know and love is video games. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one, hopefully. Goodbye. This is literally the first time I'm going to say welcome back, and I mean it.